Glavin. I'm an attorney at the Department of Procurement Services. On behalf of Mayor Rahm Emanuel, our Commissioner Jamie Rhee, the Chief Procurement Officer for the City of Chicago, I want to take this time to welcome you and thank you for taking time out of your schedules to participate in our workshop. During the next hour, I'm going to try and do my best to make it worth your while, give you as much information as I can, and at the very end, as we indicated, I'll open up the session for questions and answers. And I hope to give you as much information as I can today, but I also hope to be a resource for you in the future. So if you would like to reach out to me in the future, feel free to do so. I'm going to give you my contact information, and you can use it at your leisure. My number where you can reach me at my office is 312-744-0851. And my cell phone is, I'm sorry, not my cell phone, my email is my name, so it's terrence.glavin@cityofchicago.org. So it's TERRENCE.GLAVIN@cityofchicago.org. And then the phone number one more time is 312-744-0851. So today we're going to talk about procurement fundamentals. And we're going to get down to some fundamentals, some basics. We're going to stay at kind of a high level, and part of that's based on time, part of that's based on individuals watching this online or in the audience today. You come from different industries, you have different businesses you operate, you provide different goods, you provide different services. So I don't want to go too specific in one area that's only relevant to a few people. I want to stay at a higher level, and it'll be helpful to everybody. Having said that, what I hope to do is give you some tips and some resources along the way where you can use your free time to do some of your own research, get even more familiar with procurement fundamentals, and then you can also go to other workshops. I teach a couple other workshops myself. We have other experts in our department that teach additional workshops that get into more detail in specific areas. So you can look at our workshop schedule either online outside this bid and bond room, or you can call us, get a copy of the workshop schedule, and you can see what workshops by title might be relevant to you. So I encourage you to attend additional workshops, or just look online where we're at on YouTube, and you'll be able to see other workshops if you want to just watch them from home or at your office. So let's get started with some procurement fundamentals. First, who are you going to be dealing with sort of at that front entry point of the procurement process? You're going to be dealing with the Department of Procurement Services, our department. We are the contracting authority for the City of Chicago. I want to emphasize the City of Chicago because as businesses or business owners or employees, you're looking for probably all the opportunities that you can find. So keep in mind, we contract for the City of Chicago. There are other governmental units that you may think we're buying for, like the Chicago Transit Authority, but they have their own procurement authority and their own procurement department. They have their own website. Metropolitan Pier and Exposition Authority, Public Buildings Commission, and the list goes on. If you want to see what sister agencies are out there, to see what opportunities they have, you can go to cityofchicago.org, that's the city website, and if you look at the top menu, there's a menu that says government. You put your cursor over that, it'll drop down a menu, and one of the links in that menu is going to say sister agencies. You can click on that, and it'll give you a list of the sister agencies and some links to their website. So that might be helpful to you in the future. But what I want to talk today about is not the procurement process for all those other governmental units, because that's not in our area of expertise necessarily. I want to talk today about City of Chicago procurement. So when you get involved with City of Chicago procurement, I think one of the starting points, just like in any industry, you want to start speaking the language that we speak, right? In order to do that, you're going to want to start learning some of the procurement terms that we use. And in order to do that, we're going to go through some definitions today. But what we do is, with our bid package, we provide a checklist, and that checklist provides a great deal of information in addition to the information I'm going to provide today. So what I'm getting at is, when you question, how am I going to know all the terms and conditions that are out there? I didn't hear them all in that 1-hour presentation that I went to at the city. Don't worry. Between looking at our city's website, our department's webpage, and then when you pick up your bid package, that opportunity, in that bid package, terms are defined throughout the documents. So it gets to the first tip that I want to throw out there. When you're getting an opportunity to bid on a project or submit a proposal on a project with any governmental unit, but especially City of Chicago, when you pick up that big package, it's going to be full of documents, full of pages. Read it front to back. Find out what it is we want to buy, exactly how we want it. Find out whether you're capable of delivering what we want the way we want it. And read all the definitions and read that document front to back. It'll be critical so that you don't have, and I'll talk about this later, so that you don't take all that time and energy and put into putting a bid or a proposal together just to have it rejected on some technicality. So always read all documents that you pick up from the city carefully and thoroughly. Now here are some procurement terms that I'll just highlight right up front. A contract, we know, is a written agreement when you're dealing with the city, between the city and the vendor to deliver goods or services. So that right there is a key point. When the city buys, we really think in two high-level categories. We're either typically buying goods or we're buying services. Goods are pretty much tangible things that more than one vendor typically sells, and services can include professional services, which is a category of services, or work services, which are less than professional, more common in nature. Still valuable, but nonetheless, we label them by law to be work services, and you'll see why that distinction is important later. I mentioned the bid package. When you see an opportunity, for example, you look in the newspaper, you see an advertisement that there's an opportunity at the City of Chicago to sell something to us, it'll tell you that you can pick up a bid package. And you'll pick it up from here. You can also receive it electronically. And when you open it up, it's going to have all those directions about how to bid, where to bid, what time it's due, what documents must be included, where you need to sign, how you submit prices, or if it's a proposal, what your proposal is supposed to look like. And so that bid package, when you pick it up, is critical to read it front and back. Sometimes you'll hear the word addendum. Well, sometimes you pick up a bid package with that opportunity, and while it's out there with the vendors, we realize that maybe something needs to be fixed in the specifications that we put out there in the bid package. Well, what we might do is we might send out to all the vendors that picked up a bid package an addendum. And it basically notifies everybody, hey, we're making this slight change in the bid package you picked up, and we want you to know about it and understand that when you bid, you'll be bound by this new information. So whenever you hear there's an addendum out there, read that front to back, because that becomes part of the bid package, essentially. We sometimes send out a clarification, and it's not up there, but a clarification is something where we're not changing the specs, but we're notifying all vendors that something's a little unclear, and we just want to explain it to you a little better than we did in our bid package. So we're not changing anything. We're just making sure all the vendors really understand what the opportunity is about as written. Sometimes you'll hear about amendments and modifications. Those are changes we make in writing after the contract's been awarded to a vendor that changes the rights, responsibilities, and obligations in some way after a contract's been awarded. You've heard already a lot about bids. The majority of city contracts are awarded through a competitive bidding process. This is by law, so if you're curious about why we do this, the Illinois Municipal Purchasing Act requires that for the most part contracts be awarded through competition to the lowest responsive and responsible bidder. What does that mean? Well, we all know what lowest bidder means. It means you're giving us the best price, but what about responsive and responsible? Well, that means that you're responsive. You're going to give us what we want the way we want it. For example, if that bid package you picked up said, we want to sell police cars, we want to buy police cars, we want to buy four-door sedans, and Your supplier, who you can get the best price from, can only provide you with SUVs to sell to the city, not cars. You can't offer us your best price on SUVs just because that's where you're going to be able to get the best price from your supplier. No, you have to give us what we want. We wanted four-door sedans, so that's what you have to bid. Now, keep in mind, sometimes bids will, or solicitations will say that we're willing to hear exceptions if you want to provide them, and that is an occasion, something that happens. But read the bid package. If it says no alternatives will be considered, don't try to bid an alternative. Give us what we want the way we want it. That's being responsive. Responsible, the other requirement, is that you're presently capable of delivering what we want the way we want it. So I'll use an auto example again. Let's say we want to service City of Chicago police cars for maintenance and repair, and our specifications say we're looking for garages to bid on, auto repair garages to bid on a project, and they must have capacity for a certain volume of vehicles, which would mean they need, let's say 10 bays with mechanics assigned to each, trained in the most modern auto technology. Well, if you're a garage with only one bay and you're a sole operator, you might not be presently capable of delivering on the scale we need. So that would be an example where a vendor may not be responsible at the moment. So if you ever hear that a vendor is responsible or not responsible, it's not really an attack on their business. If they're not responsible, it's not really saying anything bad about the owners of that business. It just means that for a certain project, they're not presently capable of delivering the way we've spec'd the project out. So bids are submitted for competitive bids. What about professional services? Well, for those projects, we can't always just go to the lowest bidder for professional services, right? An example would be healthcare. If you need medical care from a doctor, is your goal to just go to the newspaper, look for an ad, and see who's running the best special for a doctor's health care that day, and you go to that? No, you want to balance. Everyone's got a budget. You don't want to overpay for what your needs are, but at the same time, you want quality service. Well, it's similar to what we do at the city. For professional services, we don't necessarily award to the lowest bidder. We balance quality with price, and we do it through an RFP process, which I'll talk about in detail later. And then what if we need a pool of vendors? Well, why do we need a pool of vendors sometimes? Well, there are occasions where we know we need certain work regularly, but we don't know exactly when we're going to need it or exactly where we're going to need it. A good example is, let's say, engineers that help us with road construction. Well, we know we have road construction in Chicago all the time, or maintenance and repair. But sometimes we don't know when the funding is coming. We use federal funds to help us pay for road construction, maintenance, and repair. Maybe the timing of it's not for sure. Maybe we don't know which roads are going to deteriorate faster than others, but we know roads deteriorate and we are going to need engineers. So what we do in certain instances, we create pools of vendors that when they submit, they don't submit a bid for the lowest price. They don't submit a proposal. They submit their qualifications when we do the RFQ. And it's like a corporate resume. You submit why you're qualified to be in a pool for a certain type of work. And if you're qualified, you get put into the pool. And then from that pool, you'll be asked to do what's called task orders, or project-specific work. And then when you finish that project-specific work on a task order, you go back in the pool. And those pools usually last a certain number of years, maybe 5 years. And then when that 5 years is up, we put the opportunity to be in the pool back out. But during the time that there's a pool, that pool is exclusive. So if there's a new company that comes around during the middle of a active pool, that new company is not going to be able to get in the pool until the pool runs its course. So that's something you want to keep in mind. Now, when there is a contracting relationship between the city and a contractor, by municipal code, we have goals. Goals to have participation by historically disadvantaged groups. Those historically disadvantaged groups include what we call MBE, WBE, and DBE firms. MBE is minority business enterprise, WBE is women-owned business enterprise, And DBE is really a combination of the two, and it's a federal designation. Typically, when there's federal funds involved, the federal government wants us to use their participation program requirements, and DBE is the way they work. So at federal level, when they use federal funds or provide federal funds for us, we typically have to meet DBE participation goals, which includes minority-owned businesses and women-owned businesses. And then if it's just a city-funded project, we use certified MBE and WBE firms. And if you want to see what the participation goals are, they are at 292, 420. Now what's that? That's a section of the Chicago Municipal Code. And you don't have to run down to your public library or a local law library to look up the municipal code. There's a authorized publisher online. It's amlegal.com. That's AMLEGAL.com. And if you go there, there's a map of the United States, a list of jurisdictions. You click through to Illinois, click through to Chicago, and then you'll see the municipal code. You click in there, and you go to 2-92-420. Now, while you're there, it's worth looking around at section 2-92 as a whole, because that's the section that creates the Department of Procurement Services, gives us our authority, and sort of lays out the structure of our department's operations and powers. So it's not a bad idea. It also talks about a lot of our programs that we put into place in contracting. So if you have time, it's worth taking a look at how that municipal code section works. And just to refresh, municipal code is sort of that lowest level of law, pretty good detail about what we're supposed to be doing, how we're supposed to do it. That sort of is under the umbrella for us of the Illinois Municipal Purchasing Act, which our section is for over 500,000 people. So if you look up Illinois Municipal Purchasing Act, over 500,000 population, you'll see the state statute that we work within. And then whenever there are federal dollars involved, even $1, there are many federal laws that can apply. I don't expect you to go out tonight and become familiar on every possible law out there, but what I think I've described so far is winning a city contract, whether it's competitive bid, proposal, or getting into a pool. I think you're starting to see, or I hope you are, that it's competitive in nature. And whenever there's a competition, right, it pays to be familiar with the rules of the competition. So I encourage you to get as familiar as you can with the rules of the competition, because as part of our mission, we put contracts into place in accordance with law so that the system has integrity and reliability so that everyone has a fair shake to get a city contract. Or, as the slide talks about, participation. So when I say participation, what the ordinance basically requires is that when a contract is awarded to a prime, that the contract either be a certified firm or award subcontracting work to a certified firm in certain percentages. So let's say that the participation requirements is, let's say 16% MBE participation, and then the bid package says 5% WBE participation. What that basically means is that, say there's a $100,000 contract awarded to a vendor, that vendor has to give real work to an MBE firm and real work to a WBE firm. And the real work has to be, for the MBE, 16% of the whole project. And in return for 16% of real work, $16,000 of real money has to be paid to that MBE. And then the WBE on that example, there was 5% participation. The WBE firm has to work 5% real work of the entire project and receive $5,000 or 5% of real money for that work. And the reason for that is it's not just about getting money to a historically disadvantaged firm or individual. It's about helping those individuals and businesses build capacity, gain work experience. So they get financial and work experience capacity, and then the goal is hopefully they grow with experience and financial strength, and eventually can bid on contracts themselves. And that's beneficial to everybody. That obviously helps the MBE, WBE firm grow, but it's also beneficial to us because the theory is the more vendors that are bidding, the bigger the pool of competition. And whenever you have greater competition, arguably it'll drive prices down. And so the city actually benefits from having this type of participation in the long run. So those are some of the thoughts on the MBE, WBE, and DBE programs. There's also indirect participation. You know, sometimes there are industries where there are no certified firms in the area. It's just a fact of life at some points. So, and the reason is this: when you hire a certified firm at the subcontracting level, they have to be certified in the specialty area of work that they're performing. And sometimes there's just not a certified firm in the area, in the specialty area that's needed for the project. Like, for example, and this is, I'm just pulling this off the top of my head. Let's say there's a certain type of very technical tunneling work that's needed for a major construction project. And the prime contractors are out there and they realize there's participation goals in the packet, so they're looking around and doing market research to find, let's say, a certified WBE firm. And there's WBE firms that do electrical work. There's WBE firms that are certified in plumbing work. But let's just say in my example, hypothetical of course, that just for this technical tunneling, there's no WBE firm in the area. Sometimes we will allow for indirect participation. Indirect participation is where you purchase supplies or materials from an MBE, WBE firm in the ordinary course of your business, but it's not necessarily for this specific contract. But if you show that you're not able to meet compliance directly, indirect participation might be an avenue in order to at least have some benefit out of the contracting process. Okay. And then in order to receive credit, indirect, the MBE, WBE firm must perform a commercially useful function. In other words, they can't just broker the work to somebody else. They have to actually, they themselves, perform a commercially useful function. Now, the ordinance allows for reductions, waivers, and it can be requested by the contractor, but keep in mind, good faith efforts are something we're going to look into. We're going to want to make sure every prime tried to find participation and meet the goals of the municipal code. So you're not entitled to a reduction, but you can request it. And if you are seeking a waiver or reduction, you must demonstrate to the satisfaction of my boss, the Chief Procurement Officer of the city, that good faith efforts were made to get MBEs and WBEs utilized. And it has to be documented, and we will review it. And if appropriate, there can be waivers and reductions. And then as far as a commercially useful function of MBEs and WBEs, the commercially useful function is that the certified firm must carry out its contract responsibilities by actually performing, managing, and supervising the work that it is assigned by way of subcontract. So it's real, and it's something that the sub has to be in control of. This is not about just making it look like there's participation. This is about actually having MBE and WBE certified firms, or DBE if it's federally funded, doing actual work, actually managing the project, and receiving actual payment for it. Okay, so I'll give you a moment just to check out the slide, but again, actually have to do the work performing a commercially useful function. Now, what's target market? Sometimes you'll see when you pick up a bid package or you'll see an advertisement, target market. Target market means we give certified firms the opportunity to bid the project first. And during that round of exclusive opportunity, non-certified firms don't even get to compete. And it's 292-460 of the Chicago Municipal Code that gives us ability to create these target market projects. Now, keep in mind, construction projects may not be bid as target market procurements, so you won't see that out there if you're in the construction industry. And just as an overview again, or a summary, there are a number of certifications, and there are a few I haven't even mentioned yet. So you got MBE, that's Minority Business Enterprise. WBE, that's women-owned business enterprise. BEPD, that's business enterprises owned by people with disabilities. DBE, it's disadvantaged business enterprise when there's federal funding involved. And then there's ACDBE, that's airport concession disadvantaged business enterprise. And that's when you're performing on concession contracts out at the airport. Now, there are other requirements in contracting that are worth noting, but before I get there, there's a lot of detail about certification, so I encourage you to go to the other workshops if you believe that you're eligible for certification, or if you're a prime and you just want to know how it all works, because you're going to be held accountable for this type of participation. Either way, you can go to the other workshops. There's workshops about how to get certified. Once you get certified, what you do with it, what are the benefits, and then there are workshops we have about compliance with these programs. So keep in mind that it's important. But one of the highlights, or a few of the highlights I want to point out, is the person that is the basis for the eligibility of one of these certifications has to be at least 51% or more owner and have actual control of the company. So that's really a MBE firm or WBE firm. So keep in mind the percentage. You can't have an MBE firm where the person that is the basis for the eligibility owns 5%. And then people from non-historically disadvantaged groups own the remaining lion's share of the company. That's not how it works. So it's got to be 51% ownership and controlled by a minority business owner, woman business owner, or disadvantaged individual if it's a BEPD. And it is the same for BEPD as it is for MBE and WBE as far as that ownership goes. And then finally, City of Chicago accepts Cook County certification. And I want to take a minute and just talk a little bit about certifications before we close out this section. And the reason I want to talk a little bit more about it is this. You might find that you're eligible. Get started right away on getting certified, even if you don't have a contract with the city yet, even if you don't even know of an opportunity that you're interested in yet. If you believe you're eligible for certification, get started on the application process, because it does take time, because we scrutinize applications to make sure that no one's benefiting from it that's not eligible. And so that investigation and that paperwork and the review by our department, it does take time. We do it as quick as we can, but it does take time. So don't wait till you see an opportunity, because the shame of it is you might see an opportunity down the line and you didn't get started, and to get the benefit of the program, you have to be certified. It's not enough that you are just inherently eligible. You have to actually be certified by the city or county. And so get started right away. That way, when you do see an opportunity, you'll be certified and be eligible for the benefit. A related, somewhat contrasting thought is, if you're eligible, you don't have to seek certification. Some individuals have asked, said, I'm eligible, so that means I have to get certified, right? Otherwise, I can't bid on projects. No, you don't have to be certified to bid on projects. So if you see a project and you're not yet certified, go for it. Bid on projects. It's just you're not going to get benefit of the program that I just described until you're certified. So the takeaways are, get started, get certified, even if you don't see an opportunity, but don't sit on the sidelines just because you're not certified. Some businesses choose to never get certified, even though they're eligible, and there are quite a few of those businesses. So you don't have to be certified in order to bid on a project. Now, another item you're going to have to be prepared for is whenever the city takes action in the area of contracting, like awarding a contract, and there are some other awarding an amendment to a contract and other actions, the city wants to know who it's doing business with. So by municipal code, the City of Chicago is allowed and does ask for economic disclosure statements from vendors it's doing business with. It's online. You can access it through cityofchicago.org. And it has a number of disclosures, like who owns the company. And sometimes if a company is owned by a company, we want to get an EDS from that company. And then if that company is owned by another company, sometimes we need to get that company's EDS. With the goal of compliance with the law that says we need to get EDS, economic disclosure statements, from anyone or any individual, any company also, that has 7.5% interest or more, either direct or indirect, in the prime contractor. And why is it direct or indirect? Because someone could just create a bunch of companies that own one another and hide behind levels and levels of ownership. So it gets down to whether or not it's direct or indirect. Do you own, or does your company own 7.5% interest or more in the prime, or have a beneficial interest of 7.5% interest or more in the prime? Then we want to know who you are. We want to know who your board of directors are. We want to know whether or not you've been convicted of any crimes. We want to know whether you've been debarred by any other governmental units from government contracting. So there's certifications, there's information, and we do go through it and review to make sure that there's not an individual or company that we should not be doing business with, making sure that those type of companies don't get in the process and receive taxpayer dollars when they're not supposed to. So be prepared. It's not a bad idea. Go online, start checking it out, because it might require you to gather some information that, again, you don't want to have a contract opportunity right in front of you and you're scrambling trying to get all this information together. It's good to sort of get familiar with these things before you even get an opportunity in mind. Now, I keep talking about opportunities. Get familiar with our resources. We have a number of resources about getting a number of resources that talk about the opportunities that are out there. There's the buying plan, which Irma mentioned earlier. That's a digested chunk of information from all our departments in the city. And the information is about what the city believes it's going to buy during the upcoming year. Now, it's not a commitment. Things change. Budgets change. Not budgets change, but policies, procedures, needs of the city, those can adjust over the course of a year, but ultimately the buying plan at least gives you an idea of what the city is buying in the upcoming year with a certain amount of detail and certainty. It's not a commitment, but it is good, helpful research for a business. Also, you can sign up for Dps Alerts. That's an electronic alert that we send out when you sign up. Gives you notices about what's going on. You can see about bid opportunities. Also, go to cityofchicago.org/procurement. That's our department's web page at the city's website. So go to cityofchicago.org/procurement. And you're going to see a whole bunch of icons, links. We put up a lot of information on our web page. Wander around in there. It's worth your time. If you're really interested in doing city business, wander around our website and look at all the links, including our policies and procedures. I talked earlier about federal law, if there's federal funds involved. I talked about state law, the Illinois Municipal Purchasing Act, municipal code under that we live by. But how about our day-to-day operations, the real details of how we operate, our policies and procedures? They're at our department's webpage, and they include our debarment process. Let's say, for example, a vendor commits fraud. There's a debarment process that gives us the opportunity to notice up a vendor for possible debarment, gives the vendor an opportunity to respond to the allegations, and the whole process from front to back. What about if you bid on a project and you thought you should have won and you didn't? You find out later that the contract was awarded to another vendor. Then there's a bid protest process, and there's policies and procedures for that. It tells you how much time you have to file your bid protest. Once you filed your bid protest, what should you expect as far as the process and procedure? When will we respond? How will we respond? So get familiar with that. What about when you have a contract with the city? Let's say you won the award. You bid well, you won the competition, you got the contract award, and you have a business relationship with one of our departments. But let's say you're delivering what you think you're supposed to be delivering in accordance with your contract, and let's say the department's not paying you. They're saying this is not what the contract says you're supposed to be doing, and so they're not paying you. Well, you might file a dispute, and a dispute goes through our department, and there are policies, procedures, and rules for disputes. So you can take it up with us if you have a dispute with your department. And it's also a two-way street. There might be instances where the department keeps receiving goods or services that don't match the contract requirements. So they might send us notice saying, hey, this is going on. We need the Department of Procurement Services to send out a cure letter and after notifying the vendor of default. So if you're not doing what you're supposed to be doing, that's oftentimes considered an event of default. If there's an event of default and the department wants us to, we oftentimes will send out a notice of default and request that the vendor cure or fix the situation. And the vendor can respond and say, no, I'm not in default. Here's why. Look, these are the goods I delivered. They match the contract. Or they might say, you got me. We're not doing what we're supposed to be doing. We're going to fix it. Or they might say, we don't care to fix it, and it is what it is, and that may lead to a contract termination. And we might send that contract termination letter, end the business relationship between the vendor and the department, and put the opportunity back out for bid, or for proposal, or for or create another pool if there's a need. So go to our department's webpage, get familiar with all the policies, rules, procedures. It will be worth your while. What else can you find on the City of Chicago webpage at the Department of Procurement Services? You can also look up awarded contracts and modifications. You can look up and see when vendors have been paid, how much they've been paid. So if you're doing a little bit of market research, maybe you're trying to see whether or not it's even worth your while to get a city contract in your area of business. You can actually look up and see what vendors are being paid, when, and how it's going. Maybe it's for networking. Maybe you want to see what entities have contracts in your area. So you can actually go to the website and look up who's got a contract for what you do. How's that important? Well, you can see when their contract ends and make sure you're ready, because when that contract ends, it's highly likely we're going to put out an ad re-advertising the project, right? Because we buy a lot of things on a one-time basis, but as you can imagine, there's a lot of things we also buy just over and over again, probably since, for decades, some items, right? Because the city's always going to need sewer caps. The city's always going to need fire hydrants. And so you know that when that fire hydrant contract ends, or when that sewer cap contract ends, you know there's going to be another one coming. So it's good to know when the contracts end. It's good to know who's had the contract. And knowing who had the contract or has it now is also good, because you might want to network with them. Maybe you don't want to be the prime contractor on a project. Maybe it's not really worth your while to take that full responsibility. Maybe you just want to work a portion of a project, and you can find out who are the primes that are currently on contracts, and you can network with them and maybe get in with them as a sub. You can also, just for your industry, you can look up the bid tabs. So if you know the line of work you want to be in, you can go to past projects or one that's currently just been bid out, and you can see bid tabulations. Bid tabulations summarize all the vendors that bid on a project, even the ones that lost, and what they bid. So you can imagine that's pretty helpful, right? Because you can network with all those vendors that are in your industry that are interested in the same work as you. It's also helpful because when you bid next time around, obviously a few years later, prices may fluctuate either higher or sometimes even lower. But it's good to have a reference point, at least, where last time around, what did everyone bid? And that could sort of give you an idea of where you might have to be, at least in the ballpark, to be competitive. And so that's pretty, I think, useful business intelligence to have when you're getting involved in the bidding process. We also post on the DPS website weekly bid opportunities. Those are contracting opportunities. You can look at new certification initiative information. And also, say you're bidding as a prime and you want to find out what MBE WBEs are out there in certain areas that you need. There's an MBE WBE directory. And all this is at cityofchicago.org/procurement. What I'm going to do in just a moment is I'm going to run through quickly just a typical front-to-back process for a competitive bid project, an RFP project, and an RFQ project. But before I do that and wrap it up with that, what I want to do is I want to encourage you to go not only to our department's webpage, but check us out on social networks. We're on Twitter, we're on Facebook, and we put out a lot of great information. And get connected with us. It'll be helpful to you to stay informed and let us know you're out there, and be active with us on Twitter and Facebook. It'll be beneficial for you. So before I take questions and answers, as I said I would at the end of the session, it might be worth your while just for me to go front to back about how the process typically works if you're interested in doing business with the city. Now, I do a separate seminar that's just on doing business with the City of Chicago, and I get into this. It might overlap a little bit, but I still think it's worth covering in this session just so you walk away with an idea of how the process might really look. So let's say a department has a need, right? We don't really buy a lot. Department of Procurement Services, we buy some paper, we buy computers, copiers, right? But we don't really buy a lot. So what we're really doing is we're creating that business relationship between you and one of the other departments, right? And by the way, if you're interested in seeing what departments are out there, remember I said there was a menu, you drop it down, there was a link to sister agencies in the government menu. That same menu has all the city departments listed with links to all their individual web pages. Wander around, and those are your potential customers, right? If you're going to get a contract with the city. So by looking at their websites, what their activities are right now, what their plans are for the future, news releases, you can get an idea of what they're buying, and you might get an idea of who your customers might be in the future. So let's say one of these departments has a need, and my example will be, let's say the Department of Information Technology is building out a brand new enterprise network to help the departments all communicate better with one another electronically. Okay? So they're the experts in an enterprise network like that. We like to think we're the experts in contracts, and hopefully we are, but we are not necessarily experts in all of the little things the city buys, including all the details of information technology. So what happens is when Department of Information Technology has a need, like an enterprise data system, they'll draft specifications that detail, we need this type of hardware, this type of service, IT service provider for maintenance and repair, installation, all these items. And actually, I just mentioned something that brings up a valid point. Remember I said we buy goods or services? Sometimes goods and services are so intermingled that they come under one project. And IT, information technology, is a great example. Sometimes you can't just buy the hardware and then call in an IT professional later to do the installation and make it all work. Sometimes you got to do it together. Or sometimes the hardware is such a small incidental part of a larger project that it doesn't make sense to tear it away and make it a separate project. So it's included with a larger professional service contract for IT. So Department of Information Technology specs out this data system. They forward the spec to us. They say, we want to buy this. We need to find vendors. We will polish off that spec, make sure it doesn't in any way violate any laws. We look at, is it too detailed? Is it so detailed that it is focused almost in a way that it eliminates the marketplace? If it is, then we go back to the user department. We say, hey, you got to make the spec a little more general. You don't need it to be this detailed. So there's a lot of back and forth. We work with them. And once we have a spec together, we put it together with our bid package, all the other documents, and we advertise it. We typically advertise in the Sun Times. We have, by law, an obligation for certain size projects to advertise. We advertise in the Sun Times. We also put them out electronically. But when you're out there and you're reading the newspaper, you see this opportunity, you are going to maybe be a provider of the goods and or services. And Let's say that part of the project does include something that is just hardware. Well, that'll be a competitive bid. You'll submit your lowest price. If you're presently capable of providing what we want the way we want it, you'll submit your lowest bid, and then through competition with others, we will award a hardware contract to the lowest responsible bidder. Now let's say a portion of the work is work services. Let's say as part of this enterprise system, they need a certain area of Department of Information Technology physically cleared out and cleaned up so that they can put hardware into it, and there's less than professional services required, there's work services required. Well, the process is the same. It'll be spec'd out, submitted to us. We'll do it through lowest bid, and we'll award the work services. But let's say once the IT needs to be installed and implemented, that's a professional service. So what we'll do is we'll put out an ad, not asking for the lowest bid, but we'll ask for proposals to be submitted. You, the vendor, will submit a written, persuasive document telling us why you're the best vendor at the best value. And through an evaluation process, a contract will be awarded. Now, let's say that there's ongoing maintenance that's going to be needed. We know it, but we don't know the exact maintenance that's going to be needed. We might, for that data center, create a pool of vendors. And for that, we will put out an advertisement, and we will ask for qualifications. But you can see the system of awarding contracts is pretty similar from the start and pretty similar to the way it wraps up. It's just in the middle how it varies a little bit by law. So it always starts with the departments and what their needs are. They're the experts. They draft the specs. They send it to us. We advertise. We receive either bids, proposals, or qualifications depending on whether we are going for common goods, work services, which are common services, or professional services. And at the end of the day, through those process, we award a contract. Once you're awarded a contract, your business relationship is very similar to your business relationship in the private sector. The department is going to place the orders with you. We don't place orders. When you receive an order, you're going to receive it from your department that is your client. You're going to respond to that order in accordance with the contract and deliver either the goods or services the way the contract tells you to, where the contract tells you to. When you're done delivering, if it's accepted by the department as compliant with the contract, then you're going to invoice the department. You don't send the invoices to us. And when you send the invoices to the department, if you did what you're supposed to, the department will approve the invoice and then forward the invoice to the comptroller, and the comptroller sends you a check. And that's how the process works. Now, this is where I'm going to stop, because remember I said in the middle, the processes do differ based on law. Like a competitive bid is followed through one way, proposals are evaluated one way, qualifications are. There's a process that's unique to each, and I'll leave that for doing business with the city of Chicago, where I'll talk about that in more detail. So with that, we have a little bit of time left. I want to thank you all for sitting through the presentation and being very attentive. What I want to do is I'm going to take questions and try to answer them today. There are some questions which are very unique to you, perhaps, and if you feel like you don't want to ask it in the audience, you'd rather ask it one-on-one, I will stick around after the session is over. I'll be glad to answer anything that's more specific to you and may not be of interest to others in the audience. I'll also say some matters, if it involves a pending project where our department's trying to make a decision, I may not be able to answer the question at this time, but if I can, I certainly will, and do my best. And I'll also be available for follow-up by email, phone, or in person outside. So thank you again. With that, why don't we open it up for any questions, if there are any, and try and give you some answers. Any questions? We have one question.
The DBE and MB participation goals, do you guys set them, or is that set by the city?
Well, the goals are set in the municipal code. So if you go to amlegal.com and go to the program section, and by the way, if there's anything I said today that you are like, oh, I should have written that down, you can go back to the streaming YouTube slides and you can get all this information, or call me, by the way. But back to your question. So the question is, and I should repeat the question when it's asked, the question is does the Department of Procurement Services set the MBE, WBE, or DBE participation goals? And the answer is they are set by ordinance, so they're in the municipal code, but they are goals. And for a variety of reasons, I think I hopefully touched upon in a way that's helpful. They can be adjusted based on things like unavailability of certain certified firms in a market. There are other reasons, but we can, they're goals, so we can adjust them, but there has to be we want justification for why we're adjusting them, or if we are waiving them, why we're waiving them. On the flip side, we can exceed the goals, again, because they're goals. So we do our best, if we can, we actually will do our best to exceed the goals that are in the municipal code for projects. So also keep in mind when you're looking at the ordinance, it'll talk about where the program, what type of work the program applies to versus other types of work. So it's good to get familiar with the municipal code on those programs. You can also reach out to us if you're just having trouble interpreting the code. We'll do our best to help you out. And there's another question over here, sir.
Let's say if you win a contract for a certain amount of time, like 5 years or something, does that have to go for open bid again, or can they just roll it over?
So contracts are awarded for what we call a base term. So it could be a certain amount of months, could be a certain amount of years. When you look at the specifications or the bid documents, oftentimes a contract will include extension options. And those extension options typically are what we call unilateral, which means we have the exclusive right to extend even if, I don't want to say even if the vendor doesn't want to, but we don't necessarily have to seek the vendor's signature to extend. We have what's called the unilateral right built into our contract. So let's say there's a 5-year contract. We come up to the 5 years. Instead of having to advertise and put it back out, if there are extension options in the original solicitation, then we can extend the contract for the extension period, maybe 1 year, maybe 2 years, but the contract will say. Then, what's also built into the contract documents is sometimes projects take time to put back out, and so in order to cover administrative time for doing that, there's sometimes 6 months or 181 days built into a contract as far as extensions that we can exercise just to make sure that we cover the gap between the time a contract is wrapping up and getting another contract into place in time. So look to your contract documents, and if you look at your contract documents, you can typically see what to expect in the future, how many years the base term is. You'll be able to see how many years the extensions are, if there are any, and you can see the 181-day cover provision.
So are those unlimited? I mean, if there's an extension, let's say it's a 1-year extension, it goes year after year after year, unlimited
The 1-year extension is, well, there's no limit to the number of extensions that can be included in a contract. Obviously, there is, you don't want to put into a bid solicitation that there's going to be 30 extension options. But it varies, but there can be a couple years built in. But no, it should not be endless extension options built into a contract.
Along those same lines, if when a contract is awarded and there is an extension, does the WBE or MBE, are they bound by that extension? Do they have to accept the extension, the WBE or MBE?
That's an interesting question. So the question, and correct me if I'm wrong, is if there's an extension and there are MBE, WBE participants involved in the project by contract as subcontractors, Do the MBE, WBE firms have to accept the extension? In other words, can they walk away and not do the work? That the program's goal is to help MBEs and WBEs. So if there is a desire to get out of the project, we're not going to put the burden on the WBE and MBE firm to stick around if it's not in their best interest to do it. But we still have by law requirements and goals to meet. So what we will do is we will work with the prime in that type of circumstance and say, look, you need to go out and do some market research and to find a substitute. And you can request substitution. Now, we might not be thrilled about the substitution, and that might turn into some follow-up and working through the problem. But at the end of the day, we're not going to typically scrutinize the MP and WBE to their detriment. Now, if a prime contractor comes to us without us hearing from the sub and says, oh, they don't want to do work anymore, I want to start using this other firm, we might scrutinize that a little closer. We might say, okay, can you get the MBE, WBE firm to get in contact with us? We want to hear from them, and who's your substitute, and do we believe the substitution's appropriate? So it'll get scrutinized, but the answer to your question is we're not in the business of holding MBE and WBE firms hostage to their detriment. We want you to want to do business with us, and so we'll do the best we can to facilitate that. Oh, thank you. They update the directory regularly, but what I would do is contact our certification unit. And just for everybody's sake, Department of Procurement Services, large organization, but within it we have several units. And two of the units are certification unit, which does all the certification of eligible firms that are historically disadvantaged. And then there are our compliance unit, which ensures we're in compliance using certified firms. But I would contact the certification unit and make sure that you're in the system if you're a certified firm, or if you're interested in getting into it. On the topic of units in our department, we also break ourselves down into units across what we're buying. So we have a construction unit for construction purchases. We have commodities unit. We have a professional services unit. We have a unit that covers all the aviation-related purchases. That's our aviation unit, of course. We have a work services section, and then we have certification and compliance section. So there are a number of units in our department. If you're ever wondering who should I be talking to, our website's very helpful, but you can always reach out to me. You can reach out to our front desk and ask, what unit should I be talking to? Any other questions?
Sorry, can you review briefly again that pool that you guys have? There was something you mentioned that you keep that pool limited. Can you recap that a little bit?
Sure.
I was trying to follow that.
So the question is can we have just a quick summary on the process for qualifying a pool? So when we submit out an advertisement to start a pool, we send out an RFQ, request for qualifications. Vendors submit their qualifications in writing. It's like a corporate resume. It can be short if it's a less than complex project. Sometimes it's binders and binders of qualifications. When it's received, we form an evaluation committee made up of members of departments at the city that have expertise in areas that are relevant to the project. They will review the written qualifications. They may bring you in and have you answer questions in person, maybe do a presentation. And as a result of the written qualifications and the presentation, the evaluation committee scores you. That score is sent to the department that is going to be making purchases. They will look at the score, and based on the evaluation committee's recommendation, which is based on the score, they'll either concur or object. If they concur, then the evaluation committee's recommendation will go to the chief procurement officer with the concurrence of the department that's buying. And then the chief procurement officer will decide whether or not the company is qualified. And if they're qualified, they get put into the pool with other qualified vendors. Any other questions? Okay, no other questions. I'm going to stick around just in case for a few minutes. Again, great audience. Appreciate how attentive you all were. Hope you see you again in workshops in the future, and have a great day.